Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, on February 23rd, 2011, you said, and I quote, Labour will not cut child benefit because, and I quote, it is the state's only recognition that Ireland remains a very expensive place to raise a child. To do so will create poverty traps, work disincentives and increase the number of children in poverty, unquote. Now, Taoiseach, you went on to break that promise, and you broke that promise. You cut child benefit by €10 per month. Now, you are introducing a new tax on mothers and families, the maternity tax. And women will be wondering, what in the name of God did women do to you or do to the government to deserve this latest attack? Because pregnant women will lose up to €2,500 per year to save €40 million. And I would like to point out that women do not go on maternity leave to earn extra money. And that suggestion and that assertion by government should be withdrawn. Because in essence, this represents, on top of child benefit, on top of the property tax, the child benefit cut, the cuts to family income supplement, particularly for families in receipt of carers allowance. These are savage attacks on families and on children. And you're looking here at $450 a month in some cases for up to 6 months. Now, for working women who have already made a significant contribution to PRSI and have paid substantial amounts to it, it's very, very unfair indeed, because there are significant additional costs to pregnancy, to childbirth, and this particular maternity benefit has always been a cushion to protect mothers and families against such costs. So, Taoiseach, you had choices here. I think you've made a wrong choice in this case, and I would ask you to reverse it.
Thank you. Taoiseach. We'll allow the Taoiseach to answer. Thanks very much.
The position of Ceann Comhairle is that, as announced in the budget on the 5th of December, maternity benefit will be treated as income for income tax purposes from the 1st of July 2013. This proposal was clearly set out on budget day. The general reaction to the measure after the budget appeared to acknowledge that it is only fair that two individuals earning the same amount of income should pay the same amount of income tax, whether that income comes from pay or maternity benefit. The proposal is exactly the same as it was announced on budget day. It's in the news now because the finance bill is currently going through the Dáil. I think it's important to state that maternity leave will remain exempt from the universal social charge and from PRSI. The measure has no impact on women who are solely reliant on maternity benefit or low-paid workers who are outside the tax net. The measure brings the treatment of maternity benefit in line with other social welfare benefits, including illness benefits, pensions and unemployment benefits. A woman on maternity benefit whose employer continues to provide a full salary during maternity benefit will continue to receive exactly the same take-home pay as they did while working. The measure, as I said, will not affect the position in relation to universal social charge on PRSI, and maternity benefit will remain exempt from that.
Deputy Martin.
Taoiseach, I think that's a very weak defence of what has occurred, because you did state, and you were very categoric. In terms of, for example, the child benefit issue, and that families are finding it extremely difficult to rear children, given the costs that are associated with it. Now, you've articulated the view that the Minister for Finance has articulated. He used the phrase in relation to this that it's correcting an anomaly. No, pregnant women are not an anomaly, Taoiseach. And the bottom line here, $450 a month is a savage cut by any yardstick. I mean, people are taking cuts across the board, but the idea of imposing such a large figure on one particular family, about 48,000 women a year we're talking about here, working women who have contributed as well to PRSI, as I've said, I think it's excessive. In one fell swoop to do this, I think it's excessive, and I think it should be reviewed. And I think there are alternatives in terms of raising the 40 million revenue that has been identified by the Minister for Finance in relation to this, because coming on top of the child benefit cut in particular, it does represent a very significant attack on the income of mothers and of families, and in terms of the difficulties that you have drawn attention to in the past to rearing children and the costs of bringing children into the world and so on. Now, we all know women do not go on maternity leave because they want to get extra money. I think that assertion should be accepted. I mean, the idea that they somehow are benefiting more than others, I do not accept in any shape or form, and I don't think that should have been put forward as a rationale or as a defence for the measure by the Minister for Finance or indeed by the Minister for Social Welfare, Joan Burton. I would ask you, Tánaiste, to seriously look at reviewing this, because the impact of it is very significant on the incomes of quite a number of people, and on some people it will be very significant. Particularly, I've come across young families on family income supplement, for example, who also had the carers allowance. Now, a measure you did prior in the previous budget took €100 off them a week.
Thanks very much.
And
thank you.
This is anti-women, and it's singling out women in a particular set of circumstances when women are pregnant, and I think it's something that you should reconsider.
Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, this is not cut at all. A woman who goes out on maternity leave will have the same take-home pay the week she goes out on maternity leave as the week she was at work. So there is no cut in the take-home income of any woman going on maternity benefit. What is being done here is that the income, where an employer is paying maternity pay, where an employer is continuing to pay a woman who goes out on maternity leave, the maternity benefit portion of that is being treated as income in the same way as all other income, and is being treated the same way as illness benefit or any other social welfare benefit. The effect is that the income, the take-home income, the effect is there is no reduction in income, because a woman who's going out on maternity benefit, the week before she goes out on maternity benefit, and she's being paid by her employer, the weeks that she's out on maternity benefit, her take-home pay will remain the same, and the same when she returns from maternity benefit. So there is no reduction in income, and it is, you are twisting the situation in order to make just a political point.
Deputy McDonald. Deputy McDonald, please. Thank you. Deputy McDonald, please. I don't think you're Deputy McDonald, are you? Oh,
thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Tánaiste, as in from Monday, letters from the Revenue Commissioners will land in the homes of 1.6 million households across the state, demanding payment of a tax on their family home. And as you know, this is a tax that takes no account of ability to pay, no account of those in negative equity, those who paid massive stamp duty, or the 180,000 families currently in mortgage distress. It is, of course, and let's acknowledge, a tax championed and proposed by Fianna Fáil and now implemented by Fine Gael and Labour. A tax with no waivers, a tax for which the exemptions are quite frankly a joke. The family home tax is a draconian piece of legislation, and it takes no account of the impact of this additional bill on families where people are at work, families where people are out of work, on the elderly, and on the economy at large. And you're pursuing actively a policy that will drive people into debt and will drive some into poverty. So, Tánaiste, I want you to set out for us the approach that will be taken in the event of non-payment or non-compliance with this tax on the family home. Can you confirm to the Dáil that the Revenue Commissioners, with the backing of government, will move to deduct this family tax from people's social welfare payments, from their wages, from their bank accounts, from their credit union accounts?
Thank you. Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, the Revenue Commissioners will commence next week in sending out communications to householders, informing them of the estimate that the Revenue Commissioners have put on the property tax which will be required to be paid. What will then happen is each householder will have the opportunity of making a return to the Revenue Commissioners and declaring themselves what they understand the value of their property to be for the purposes of the property tax. The Revenue Commissioners will be pursuing an information campaign beginning next week, informing householders about the steps that they can take to make that declaration, and indeed the steps that they can take where letters have been issued either in error or where they've been issued in duplicate form, because up to now, or up to relatively recently, there hasn't been a full database of properties that are owned in the state. So what we are dealing with next week and over the next number of weeks will be a period of time where householders can contact the Revenue Commissioners if the estimate is considered to be inaccurate or wrong. They can make a declaration as to what the value of their property is, and I would encourage everybody who gets a communication from the Revenue Commissioners to make that contact with the Revenue Commissioners where they believe that the information that is sent out to them is in any way either inaccurate or overstated or wrongly stated. The Revenue Commissioners, of course, this is a tax measure which is required to be collected. The Revenue Commissioners are the authority who collect tax in the country. And as with all taxes, which are the responsibility of the Revenue Commissioners, they will use the methods that are available to them to ensure that the tax is paid. And I'm sure that Sinn Féin, along with every other party in the House, will encourage everybody to be tax compliant.
Deputy McDonald, thank you.
Tánaiste, I asked you very specifically about the measures that will be pursued in the event of people not paying the tax. And just on your issue of tax compliance and the sniggers from your backbenchers and indeed some of your front bench. The issue here, excuse me, the issue here is not people not wishing to be tax compliant. That's not the issue here at all. The issue here, Tánaiste, is that there are a vast number of people who simply cannot afford this tax. And it's for that reason that your government, and don't try and lay this on the Revenue Commissioners, the legislation rushed through this House by Labour and Fine Gael will allow this family tax to be taken from social welfare payments, from people's wages, from their bank accounts and from their credit union accounts. Now, I know that some of you are sort of in the land of Nod or on a parallel universe. That much is clear from the government benches. But how on earth can you justify or defend a situation where the state, the government, through the Revenue Commissioners, will put their hands into the pockets of people who are struggling, will deduct this tax from a social welfare payment, a job seeker's allowance, or an old age pension, take it from people's wages that have been cut.
Thank you, Deputy.
Or worse still, put your hand, reach the government's hand into people's bank accounts and credit union accounts. How do you defend that? And don't give us the line on tax compliance and smart aleck rhetoric from that side of the House. People don't have it. Do you grasp that? And how do you defend, Tánaiste, a system whereby people who are struggling will have the hand of government put into their pockets if ever there were a case of really heavy-handed tactics by a government and a state against the citizens, if ever there were a case of Big Brother government, this certainly is it. So forget about the revenue commissioners. You're in charge. You defend for us those measures.
Well, first of all, this tax is a much smaller tax than the property tax, which Sinn Féin has no difficulty with north of the border. But then, you know, Sinn Féin's. It's okay. It seems to be.
Do as I say, not as I do.
You know, it seems to be okay for the deputy to get up and to lash around any political.
Sorry. Shh. Would you please? Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Deputy Ferris. Would you please afford the honesty?
No. It's fine. It's fine. I can't call it. Sinn Féin have always been ambiguous about free speech. And you know, it seems to be okay. It seems to be okay.
No, please.
It seems to be okay.
I'd like the same protection to all sides of the House. No, please. Thank you.
I just want to reply. I mean, Deputy McDonald seems to think that it is okay for her to get up and lash any political charge, but you know, when one replies in kind, there seems to be a problem with that. The reality. I'm answering the question. If you give me the opportunity. I'm quite happy to answer the question, but please listen to the answer. The reality is that this property tax is nowhere near as high as the property tax that Sinn Féin has no difficulty in defending north of the border. But Sinn Féin's hypocrisy has no boundary, either in terms of debate or in terms of territory. As far as the collection of this tax is concerned, there are well-established mechanisms for the collection of tax. This is a responsibility of the revenue commissioners. They are doing a campaign which is beginning next Monday of informing householders what their estimate is of what the valuation of properties are and what the tax liability is going to be. There will be a period of time within which householders can engage with the revenue commissioners about that. If somebody thinks that they've got the revenue commissioners have got it wrong, they can go back to the revenue commissioners, make their declaration to the revenue commissioners about the value of their property, and then that is what it will be assessed on. So there's going to be a period of time where householders will be able to engage with the revenue commissioners in relation to the issue. Now, you know, perhaps one of the things that Sinn Féin might address is I note that there is a campaign urging people not to pay this tax and not to cooperate with it. And we've yet to hear whether Sinn Féin supports that campaign or not, or whether, like other parties in this House, whether like everybody else, Sinn Féin is going to encourage householders to be compliant with the tax. The revenue commissioners.
Would you please? You demand silence when you're speaking. So
the method of collecting taxes and the powers that are available to the revenue commissioners, where a tax is not paid, are well known, and the question is whether you support those or not.
Deputy Halligan, thank you.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Tánaiste, new figures emerged at the Institute of Guidance Counsellors National Conference last week that guidance counsellors' hours for second-level schools around the country had been cut by 25%. Tánaiste, these figures came from the Minister for Education himself and were an upward revision of estimates made by the counsellors. However, the Minister failed to touch upon what I believe to be a more revealing statistic. That cuts introduced last September have brought about a 51% reduction in counselling services for an essential one-to-one work at a time when, according to many school principals, demand for counselling services is at crisis levels. Tánaiste, you would know that guidance counselling is critical for second-level students as they make important decisions to cope with the broad range of personal difficulties and school is a good place to nip in the bud the distress that may be caused later on, and at huge social and fiscal costs to the state. The bottom line is, Taoiseach, that students are suffering as a result of these short-sighted cuts. And an astonishing 1 in 10 children are presenting themselves with some form of depression or serious mental problems. Taoiseach, before I ask you a very brief question, you would know that teenagers are particularly reluctant to ask for help, and it matters more now than ever that we detect signs early. With modern paced lifestyles, many of today's stress-related problems were unknown to the older generation. Body imaging, cyberbullying, bullyism, and, of course, severe peer pressure. All have contributed to teens being at greater risk to depression, with sometimes desperate and disastrous consequences with the taking of one's own life. And in Dublin last week, I spoke to a principal who has already gone to 2 funerals with teenagers that have taken their lives. My question to you is very brief, Taoiseach. Will you give a commitment to ring-fence funding for students? It's bad enough that they're saddled with the huge national debt when they leave school at a time and unemployment is at crisis levels. I would accept that budgets are tight, but surely happiness and wellness of our young people depends on the government taking action and not providing lip service.
Thank you.
Count Corley, in light of the concerns which were expressed last year, the Department of Education requested that the National Council for Guidance Education carry out a review on schools' provision for guidance. The NCGE surveyed schools in March of 2012 before the budget measure was introduced, and the following October after its introduction. The final report will be published in the coming months, but initial findings have been presented to the Department of Education in preparation for this conference. Initial findings would suggest that schools continue to prioritise guidance programmes. The report also says that there has been increased group work and class-based activity at senior cycle. This is in keeping with best practice in guidance. Such best practice suggests that a one-to-one guidance counselling is best conducted after such group work. There have been some reductions in the number of guidance hours available to schools, but certainly not as of the order as some have claimed. Schools continue to provide and prioritise guidance. In terms of hours, the NCGE survey suggests that there has been a reduction of approximately 25% in allocated hours for guidance. The actual reduction depends largely on school size, and it's as follows. 4 hours a week on average in second-level schools with less than 400 students. These schools typically would have had a part-time guidance counsellor under the old allocation system. 5 hours a week on average in second-level schools with between 400 and 700 students. And these schools would typically have had 1 full-time guidance counsellor under the old allocation system, and 11.5 hours a week in large schools with over 700 students. And these schools typically would have more than 1 guidance counsellor under the old allocation system.
Taoiseach, with respect to you, I think you missed the point. It's not about group counselling, it's about one-to-one counselling. And I'll give you an example. A student presents himself, he's gay. He doesn't want to discuss this in group counselling. Or if he has a very personal problem at home, he needs one-to-one counselling. I would also make the point that in supplying schools with documents on health initiatives, bullying programmes and so on, what is the point if the resources are not available to implement them? And I really do believe this, and I always get my facts and figures correct, and I speak to people that are on the cold face of dealing with this problem. And I've already spoken to 7 or 8 principals, some in Dublin, some in Waterford, and they believe the situation is at critical levels where students more and more are presenting themselves with very, very serious problems but have nobody to speak to regarding those problems. For instance, in some countries in Europe, a social worker is employed in every school to specifically deal with problems associated with teens growing up. And the consequences of that is that teenage depression, teenage mental health issues, and ultimately people that decide to leave this planet and take their own lives have been dealt with comprehensively in some other countries. I would urge you, Tánaiste, and I know you're aware of this, and I'm not going to criticise you because I know you are, I know the Minister for Health is, but it is no good giving lip service to this. Speak to principals, speak to parents. They will tell you it's at crisis levels. It's not the group servicing they need, it's the one-to-one counselling.
Thank you. Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, the work that is done in schools is admirable. The work that's done at a one-to-one level all of the time between individual teachers and students in schools, where an individual teacher is either told of a particular problem, or in some cases where an individual teacher senses that there is a problem and decides to take some action on it. The work that's done by school principals, the work that's done by guidance counsellors in school is very far-reaching. I also want to say that this is an issue that the Minister for Education has given particular emphasis to. He recently published the guidelines in relation to cyberbullying. He published recently the strategy and policy in relation to well-being in schools, which addresses the very issues that Deputy Halligan has raised. And as part of the reform of the junior certificate cycle, the issue of well-being in schools is being integrated into the new junior certificate programme. This isn't an issue that is some kind of a set-aside. It's not some kind of an issue that can be kind of located, you know, as a separate segment of school activity. It is very, very much part of the overall work that is done in schools by teachers working with pupils, by school principals working with pupils, and to a revised policy framework which has been put in place by the Minister for Education.
Thank you, Tánaiste.